So it has begun. There we are. Lloyd, how many cats are you cat sitting currently?
There are two cats, Ziggy and Stardust, which is pretty great. And they're incredibly shy all day, never come near me. And then I go to bed, and they're like on the bed, waking me up nonstop. It's really strange.
Oh, well, it's because you're not like available to them. You're busy sleeping, so they want to just wreck that for you,
ruin it as much as possible. Yeah,
that is how they're programmed.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
it's been a while, Lloyd.
A great many days and months.
Many moons have passed overhead. To explain, as we're on Performance Check, and this is the first time I've posted on Performance Check for 3 months when I was doing another Dias cast. I've been away. I've been in a touring production of Macbeth and other stuff for ages. So, you what? Sorry?
Don't say it.
I say it all the time. I'm just fed up. I started doing that. For those of you that don't know, Macbeth has a tradition or a curse, whatever you want to call it. You can't say Macbeth. If you say Macbeth, it's bad luck. You're supposed to call it the Scottish play. And people kept saying that to me, and to the point, like, for months.
Imagine if you're touring it, it gets very tiring. Yeah.
And I'm like, Macbeth, because I want something horrible to happen. I want it to end. No, but so that's what I've been doing, and as such, we'll actually be broaching that as a topic later within the Dias cast.
Were you Macbeth?
Is the name. What?
Were you Macbeth?
I was Macbeth.
Ooh.
I was Macbeth.
Rad.
Yeah. It is very cool. It is a rad dude. It's just weird having all of those lines in your head for that long, because like you start to respond to like normal human beings.
Yeah.
Like him. And it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure I like that. Because he's a murderer. He's a psychopath by the end.
Yep, we're doing Ubu Ra for our youth theatre, and it's kind of like a piss take of Macbeth by this French absurdist. Very strange. But there's lots of like very similarities, like his wife pushes him into doing it, and there's all this sort of stuff. But it's like also a lot of fart jokes and dumb stuff as well. But yeah.
I remember you saying when you started that, and it blew my mind, because I actually wrote part of my dissertation on Ubu Roy. I focused on absurd theatre, and it's by Alfred Jarry, right?
Yeah, yep.
The dude was crazy. There would be people that would come across him in the street and say, if someone were to ask him directions, tell me, where is the train station? He would literally pull a revolver out of his coat and point it in their face and then give them the directions. Like, the dude was insane. Like, he was off his tits on Amazon the whole time.
That's strange. That's very strange.
It's crazy. He would take his gun whilst he was like chilling out in his little house. Like he rented like a floor between floors because he was a really small man, and he would fire his gun into the ceiling. And allegedly, the person living upstairs one day came down and said, "Excuse me, do you mind not firing your gun? You're going to kill my children." And then to which he replies, "I'll be happy to make more of them with you." He's a scumbag and an evil, crazy dude.
God,
but like, he's but also insane and very funny. Doesn't a bear explode?
There is. The clown explodes.
Is that a clown?
At the end of one of, like, there's no mention of the clown in the scene at all. And then like the scene finishes and then a clown explodes.
And then the clown explodes.
Yeah, there is a bear that comes in and they fight it, and it's
that's right. Thing. There is a bear in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I know they rioted. They rioted in Paris when that first was produced.
Like, it's bad. Like, I read through it and I was like, this is terrible. I hate it. Like, it's really bad. Like,
it's the ravings of a lunatic. He was a lunatic, and he have you ever heard about his brush with Picasso?
No.
So basically, around the time that Jarry was writing plays, he I'm going to talk about this instead of role-playing games. It's fun. The Mona Lisa was stolen from the gallery in Paris. Can't remember the name of it, but the Mona Lisa was stolen, and for some reason, the authorities decided that perhaps this Troublemaker was the
Maniac.
cause.
Yeah.
So they go over to him and they knock on his door and they say, "Excuse me, Mr. Jerry, we're just wondering if you happen to know anything about the missing Mona Lisa." And he says, I actually do. I know who did it." And they were like, "Who?" And they were like, he was like, "Picasso. Picasso stole it." So they were like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "I absolutely mean it. Picasso stole it." So the French authorities then took an excursion to Spain to hunt down Picasso, who hadn't stolen it.
Yeah.
But people just rock up on his door saying, "You've stolen the Mona Lisa." And he's like, "No, I haven't." What?
No, I haven't, and I would never do that.
Yeah, so that dude's just asking for trouble all the time. What else have you been up to, man?
I run a youth theater. We were writing a play called Eggplant about sexual health for young people.
That's helpful.
Good. We did like a workshop, and there was like this scene where it was just improvised, and like two of them were going on a date, and people kept like the other actors kept popping out of like places being like, "You have to fuck him, you have to fuck him." And we were like, "Is this a thing?" Like, and they were like, "Yeah, there's like a lot of pressure to have sex with people."
This is part of it.
And we were like, "Oh, okay." So then we started talking about it, and they like opened up way more than we anticipated. And they were like, "Yeah, sex is really hard. It's really confusing." Blah blah blah. We're like, "Okay, well, I guess we'll do a play on this." This is good. Yeah, it's tricky because like there's lots of welfare stuff with youth theater where you have to like be pretty like clear, you know. And so like we did some training since, and I do like consent workshops and stuff anyway, but we did some training since to be like clear in the fact of what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's good. We got funded by the Arts Council for that play.
Did.
Great.
Congratulations again.
You got a bunch of money, which is nice. Yeah, and then I've been trying to do this fucking book. It's very nearly done.
It's on the way. It's very exciting, man. Like I always see you like putting things into the chats and things, and yeah, it's been your is it Magnus Opus or Magnum Opus?
Yeah,
Magnum Opus, that's it. Yeah,
yeah, it's really been the worst. Yeah, I don't know. Don't do a book on your own. Listen, I know now, but don't do it. It's too much for one man.
A lot of work, but it kind of is and it kind of isn't. You've pulled it off, man. I know. Obviously, it's been through sacrifice of time, lots of time.
Yeah, and it's very late.
But it's better to be late than not as good as it could be if you rushed it.
Yes, well, that's what I kind of said to people as well on updates. I was like, it'll be done when it's done, and it'll be good when it's done, or I can give it to you now, and it's like a mess. So like, I don't know, you know.
It's like throwing the jigsaw pieces at someone. Oh, I guess actually you buy a jigsaw piece to put it together, so that's actually a bad example.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a tricky one because like I am. It's really not a project you can do on your own. I don't think. Like in hindsight, it's not something that you can do on your own. I really needed to have like a team, and it's really a big project. There's a lot going on, but it's nearly there. Really, nearly there.
Yeah, man.
It feels pretty satisfying.
It's going to be incredible, man. What other news do we have? We're both going to be at AtCon.
We are, yeah. That's news.
That is news. We're both going to be at AtCon. For those of you who don't know, if you jump over to the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, I'm pretty sure everyone who watches my channel is there now. But there is a convention held by the lads that run Absolute Tabletop. It's occurring in Tacoma, Washington. I'm not entirely sure if there are tickets still available, but if you want to hang out with people like me and Lloyd and are in that direction, come by.
Yeah, or if you're not, I mean, we're going a long way. You're actually going further than me, which is annoying because last year I was close to being the furthest traveling person.
Oh, yeah, I guess
you'll be traveling like 100 or so miles further than me, I guess, however far it is from here to London. A couple of 100 miles further than me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Is yours direct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is yours?
Yeah, I think it is. Sorry, we're talking about flight plans. Anyway, that's not the most gripping.
Yeah. Well, I paid a little bit more. It's actually cheaper to go direct than it was to stop in Boston for 6 hours. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 11 hours or something, or like maybe it's like 10. I don't know. It's far. It's really fucking far.
It isn't actually as long as I thought it was going to be, though, weirdly. It's still longer for me by a little bit, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be more. It doesn't matter anyway. I thought it was going to be a long time. Anyway, it is going to be a long time. I'll have to get a book, I guess. Right. So anyway, let's talk about some role-playing game stuff. So here on the seminal role-playing game podcast, the Dice Cast, we fling. It is. We established it was ages ago. We ask questions of the community in the Facebook group, and we then read them out and try and answer them. But first, we have a few topics that we discuss to begin with. So, Lloyd, as I've got a very sore throat, you're in charge of that, okay?
Okay.
So you start us off. What are we talking about?
So I wanted to talk about making a setting for players as opposed to for the sake of the setting. Because recently, myself and Jeff and Nico and Quo started a campaign called Embers of Light that Jeff runs, and it started from me saying I'd like to play in a campaign where I can be a big powerful wizard.
Yes,
that was the impetus for the setting. It was like, I want to play a wizard and I want to be powerful. How can we achieve that? And so we just started with that. Like, I want to play a wizard. That's all it was. And then we built the setting from there. And we were like, okay, well, how can we do that? And then we talked about different levels of power. So I'm the highest level character. I'm level 10. And then I think Quo's character is level 8. And then Nico is slightly lower. And there was discussions about why is it the case that wizards are so powerful, and if they are so powerful, why don't they rule the world? Because they would, and so it was decided that all wizards were elves, and that all wizards that remain now are serving noble houses in a sort of maester-slave relationship. Because there was once an elven empire, it was taken down by humanity, and now the elves live in this sort of after this accord, this peace thing that was signed, they live in service to a noble house, and they're limited in what magic that they can do. So they have these exemplars, which is what Quo is, which is a guardian, a Templar, who watches you, and if you start fucking around or become a little bit too crazy with the magic, he kills you.
Excellent. So I like the vibe.
He's like your shadow that always follows you everywhere that you go, if you're an elf. So that was it all kind of spread from I want to play a wizard, and then we thought, okay, wizards would rule the world if they were powerful. Why don't they? Okay, here's why. And then went on from there basically, and built it sort of incrementally, but it all came from I want to play a wizard. And it's more and more now. We were talking about making a setting yesterday with Keel a little bit, and we were talking about just making settings in general, and it's a really good way to make a game. It's not really necessarily the best way to make a setting. Because the thing about the setting now is it's so hyper focused on what we're doing, which is there's an elf, there's a Templar, and there's Nico's character who's a lady whose house has been destroyed. And it's really focused on that. If you want to do anything else in the setting, there's not a lot written about it or discussed about it.
Right.
But it works super well for the game that we want to play. And I guess the question is should you, or is it useful to build a setting with only players in mind, as opposed to the usual way, which is here's a top-down sort of here are the gods, here is the blah blah blah. It's a very different way to approach building a setting because it's entirely focused on playing the campaign that you plan on playing, as opposed to building a setting that's a toolbox that you can use for any sort of game.
Yeah, I understand, and to be honest with you, I think more and more that is probably it's definitely a more efficient way of going about it, isn't it? Because when you're creating this setting, you're creating the exact material that you're then going to be using in the session, rather than going away and world building for ages and ages and then dropping it in front of people. Which is something I'm going to have to bring up, because the other thing we're talking about is taking long breaks from the hobby. I've had a long time away from playing games at all. So the only thing I've really done towards role-playing games is think about a new setting. So this will be an interesting experiment to see how this goes, I think. So tell me about the actual game itself, because I'm guessing from that then, you say the house has been destroyed. What is the thrust of the campaign? Is it to rebuild the house? Is it to find revenge?
Both. Reclaim our birthright, Nico's character's birthright, and to sort of rebuild from nothing. And so it's basically like Nico's character was the daughter, or like the second or third daughter or something, and so she was away studying, and that's why she wasn't killed in the attack, because all of the other family were killed. And so myself, who's a very powerful wizard, I took like some of the people with me and like legged it. Some of the most important people legged it to her, because I knew that she was still she's the heir basically.
Yeah.
And so this like unprepared girl is now like in charge of the house, and she has like this 1,000-year-old elf who was her teacher when she was a kid, and now like is, I mean, people are afraid of the elves, which is kind of interesting too, because they kind of live forever, and it's why are you more afraid of elves, you know, like they live forever.
Elves and wizards together.
And wizards. Yeah, so he's both of those things. Yeah, and so it's like this unprepared character has these like very powerful people. Nico compared it to like the Cold War, where like there's my character who's like just devastatingly powerful, and so is Quo's. And like if we come to blows, like everyone will die. You know, like all of the people. Like it's very likely that if I lose it and start using my big magic, like everyone will die. So there's like a real sort of tension that runs through it. And like even though we're working together well, and like obviously Quo's character and my character have done lots of stuff before, like they've been serving the house for a long time. So there is obviously a kind of a friendship there, but also there's this like thing that looms over it, which is like every day we have to go through this prayer where he has to go like, I'm your shadow. Do you know what happens if you fuck up? And I have to go, yes, I know what happens if I fuck up. You kill me. And so there's like ritualized sort of like put the elf in his place, but also the elf can like see through time and like summon things from the ether. And, you know, like there's a lot of stuff happening where like, and like, for example, we like discovered that because every noble house has an elf. And we discovered that like we were being spied on by another house, and then like my elf had a conversation in a dream with another elf, where we just like sat in a dream and like had a conversation, you know, and didn't tell anybody, obviously. So like it's one of the things that I think is interesting is like realistically you can't stop the elf doing what he wants to do.
Yeah,
it requires the elf accepting it, because probably could just like go nuts and kill people and like escape without too much issue, you know.
I think that's like, and I can imagine, I can already hear and tell from the way that you're describing it that there's a really nice way of it's inbuilt drama essentially, because the elf is the most powerful in the group, but also is the most ostracized and downtrodden within society. Yep. Which I think is a really nice dichotomy, because it's polar opposites. Really, you should see the all-powerful elf at the top of the chain, but he's sort of at the bottom still, which I really like that idea. That's really cool. It kind of makes me think a little bit of I can't remember what they were called, but I think there were like people in, is it the Inquisition in Warhammer 40k, where they shoot people in the head if they get too chaotic or something.
Oh, psychers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so like there is a running, I really like that idea. And also the idea that you can totally have, you know, you can be the most powerful player in the game technically, but I like the fact that if you don't want to use that power, because it will kill you, and it will kill everyone else as well.
Yeah. There's like an idea that we put through as well, that like elves can kind of lose their connection to this world because they live for so long, and like they don't really make connections the same way that people do, and they like think in sort of like astrophysical, metaphysical terms, and so like it's easy for them to like lose touch with the world that they're in. And so if that happens, that's how they tend to go mental and like go magic mental, you know, and lose
magic
it. So
mental.
Yeah. And so there's like an impetus for like elves to make friendships with humans and like maintain connections and stuff, because otherwise they might just like lose it and turn into whatever, a ghost or something, you know.
That is so cool. It's like the it's the problem that people have with writing Superman as well. I know we've probably talked about this before, but it's the interesting thing about Superman is he could wipe out a city if he wanted to, trying to save someone, but he has to make sure he doesn't. So there's the drama is him having to solve something without using his full power sometimes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Superman mostly fights himself. You know,
Yes,
once he fights his own morality, because like the difficulty for Superman is often not beating the bad guys because he's the most powerful thing that's ever been. It's often about it's often about him fighting his own morality and like understanding and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Where do you see the where do you see the campaign going in terms of like, because we talked about the setting was created to accommodate this kind of storytelling about a powerful wizard, about the houses that he now serves, and about the characters that surround that conflict. What do you think? Do you think that there are potential? Do you think there's potential for more stories to be told now that this setting has kind of getting sort of fleshed out as you play it, or do you think it will always be about the one story?
The thing about it is, I think like that because it's very fleshed out in terms of like, here's what a paladin looks like, here's what a cleric looks like, here's what a wizard looks like, because that's what we wanted to play. And so if you're playing a game that doesn't have a wizard in it, you're missing out on like a huge chunk of what makes the setting interesting. Which is this like understanding of like, oh, there's elves and they, you know, are ancient and they serve houses and they're not allowed to use their full magic. So if you're not using that, then I mean, I think there's definitely stuff that you can do, and like there's stuff with like we made a bunch of houses and stuff, and they all come from this like disciples and stuff. There's religious stuff as well, but I think that like the interesting, or for me the most interesting thing about the setting is the elf and exemplar sort of dichotomy, where like this elf is very, very powerful, but also there's this dude whose job it is to potentially kill him at all times, and what that looks like for either of those characters is kind of mental, you know. And it's like a conflict on top of everything else, because the human conflict that we're doing, which is like, oh, we better get revenge and like rebuild this house. For like my character, that's like really not that important. You know, he's going to live forever, and like in 1,000 years, it'll all be forgotten anyway. But the conflict that's happening is like more than that. There's like secrets and stuff involved in the house, and that's one of the reasons that he's there. Is that it's more than just like, I care about these people. There's like more important stuff happening as far as he's concerned, you know.
I really like the idea that potentially like the elves could have just agreed to this. I know obviously there was a horrible conflict which led to them being these maester-like figures, but I kind of like the idea that it could almost have been like an act of kindness on there, or not an act of kindness, but maybe just an act of indifference. Sure, we'll serve you because your houses will be dust.
Yeah,
while I'm still like.
Yeah, and the other
getting better at this lifetime achievement of skill or whatever. Like I could do anything I want. I just have to wait for you to die.
The other thing that's interesting about it is like it's entirely possible that the elves like agreed to this, but now just run the world anyway, because they serve as maesters, and so like they could just be influencing from a very young age everyone, like every generation of the house, and like moving the houses in those directions and stuff. It's entirely possible, you know, that they are controlling the world anyway, and humans think that they have them in chains, but maybe they don't, you know.
I'd love to see house portraits of the great houses that these elves are part of, house portraits of the different heads of the houses and then their heirs and so on. And in each portrait, it's the same elf.
Yeah, identical. Yeah.
That's fucking cool, man. I really like that idea. Okay. Are these, I don't know actually if are these games public, or have you been playing offline?
No, Jeff has them on his channel.
There we go.
Counterbalance. Check it out.
In Counterbalance, go and check out our good friend Jeff Doty's games, because that sounds awesome. Well, I'm gonna have to go back and watch those, because I've had like periphery information, but I didn't fully know everything about that setting. But that's really cool. Is it regular? Is it a regular game?
Yep, it's supposed to be. I think we're playing this Saturday, or maybe next Saturday. Every second Saturday, anyway.
Well, there we go. Have you got an idea? Well, you mentioned that there's going to be another game that's coming up that you think you might use the same principle and create the world for the game? Because if I'm not mistaken, that's how Jade Horde got going as well, wasn't it? It was just an exploration of this topic.
Yeah, we talked about orcs, and then we were like, let's make orcs cool, and then we did that pretty quickly. Jeff says 20th is the next session.
There we are. 20th on a Counterbalance.
Yeah, well, we were going to. So Fourth Age, which is a campaign I was running on Tuesdays, had to stop because Taylor has a lot going on, and Nico had to get a job, and so we're down 2 players on that. And so we were looking at what else we were going to do. So we thought about doing a same sort of. We decided to play Star Wars, but but we kind of talked about it a little bit. We didn't have a strong, like, neither of the players had like a really strong urge to play a particular thing, or like, which is the case with Embers. Was I want to play a wizard? How can I do that? So yeah, we didn't go ahead and do it, but that was the idea, and I think it's a really effective way to make a game. Like, what are the players doing as opposed to what's the setting for?
Yeah,
because that's what the setting is for. It's what the players are going to do in it, you know. But I think it's really easy to get into this like mindset of like, I have to think about all the minutia and all of the, what is this inn called, and what's the name of this country, and who's the patrician of this head. Like, you don't need all of that, you know, to get started. You really don't. You just need like big level stuff, and then thinking about what each player is. Like, if you're a paladin, what does the paladin mean in this setting, and what does a mage mean in this setting and stuff. And only think about what the players are doing, you know, and because that's all the stuff that really matters when you start.
It is, and it actually brings us nicely onto the next topic, because this is something that I've had a little bit of a battle with. The next topic is dealing with having really long breaks from the hobby. So as I mentioned at the top, I've been away from gaming for nearly about 6 months, nearly 7 months. And it sucked, but it was because I just literally wasn't at my house. I was constantly on the road, always on the move. But my heart was always with role-playing games, and I would be on long journeys, and I would think about them an awful lot, which made me want to play them more, which kind of wasn't, you know, it was a shame, but it also meant that I was just thinking about what I was going to do, and I wanted to do something new. And like Godgrave came out of that, and if you want to know more about that setting, the last video on my channel is about that, so you can go and check that out. But one thing that I've desperately tried to do is not think about it too much, because I don't. That's the exact thing that I want to avoid is setting up too much that's unnecessary. But at the same time, the setting itself does require certain things to be in place. And for those of you that don't know, Godgrave is essentially a setting where the gods that did exist. It's a fantasy world where gods exist, and it's known because paladins and clerics get their powers. One day, the gods go. They're gone. They're either dead, vanished, whatever. It doesn't matter. The powers of the clerics go. Everything just grinds to a halt. And because of that, there's a sort of spiritual apocalypse that unmakes the world as we know it. But that means that the world is basically going to be coated with this religion. And I didn't really know anything about what that was going to be. So basically the way that I decided not to think too much about the setting was just think about what that religion was like. And that's what I kind of did. In fact, I have this to show you because I would be on the road quite a lot. I basically use this as a notebook, just to jot down ideas and things. And I started to write the Charter, which is the tenets of the Triptychon, which is the book of the faith that exists in the world. And I thought everything else could spin from that.
Yeah.
Which has kind of been fun. It also makes me feel like that if this book was ever found, someone would think I'm a psychopath that's trying to start a cult. Because I'm talking about this triple deity and about the hand and the eye and the mouth, and it's all a bit heavy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that didn't happen.
Well, it's good to have. I think that kind of stuff is really useful, particularly like if you think about the Middle Ages in our world, like the entire Western Europe, well, most of Europe, like was so religious.
Yeah,
and it like it changed every part of society in a major way. So it is kind of like it's something I often think about, like Forgotten Realms, is like, if gods are literally real, like why is like it not the case that, like, I guess there's also wizards are real, so like why is it not a magocracy, and why is it not a theocracy, and like all this sort of stuff. But like you would think that people would be so fucking pious because like gods are literally real and people do miracles every day, you know?
Yeah.
There's like stuff there to think about, and you'd think it would affect the world in a much bigger way. But yeah, that is good to think about. I guess like it's really useful to build a setting with the people who are going to play in it because you can gauge what they're interested in, you know,
Exactly.
and what they want to explore in it. I've been doing like now when I do session 0, instead of doing a session 0, I make a document and then I like ask the players like, what are things you're interested in? Like, what are some pillars of the campaign for you that you really want to explore? That helps a lot with like building the campaign because it's like, what do I need to focus on? You know, particularly if it's a big setting or like one that's not well defined.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Because like if you're running this Godgrave thing and somebody plays a cleric, then it's really important that you have all the god stuff down. But if no one plays a cleric, then it's not nearly as important, you know, or a paladin. Like if all of your players decide to play bumbling idiot fighters, then like the sort of big heady stuff is not really as important, maybe, you know. It's good for you to know it, but like, yeah, it's good to think about like those sort of specific
player-driven things. The only thing, though, and this is what I thought about whilst I was like halfway through, I was like, hang on a second, you put all this work into this religious text, and this is a religion that no longer has the weight that it did in that world. So, like, what's the point of being there? But I thought, well, the world itself still needs to have some kind of, it's sort of like their apocalypse. So they still are going to refer to things and they still swear by different things and have different rituals that come from the way that that world functioned. But I don't know, I basically, when I did like the big interest post for it and stuff, like I put a map up there, and the map is just a rough kind of outline of what I want it to look like and where certain key things will be. And that's about it. Like the thing that I've done the most actually is just listen to history stuff.
Yeah.
Rather than actually try and, you know, force everything in my world to be different. You know, grass is red in this world, or whatever. Just for the sake of it. Like, I've decided not to do anything like that. I've just looked at points in history where, you know, obviously religion was a focal point of the cause of great wars and things like that, like the Crusades. I've looked into that quite a lot and stuff like that. And that has been a really useful tool because I think that I could now run a medieval-esque human-only fantasy setting just off the bat now.
Yeah.
But without any of the work done, which is, I don't know how to feel about it. It's different to how I usually prepare, put it that way.
I think it's good to like base your setting 99% in reality because it's much easier for people to come into it, you know. Like sometimes you like come across a setting like Numenera, which is a cool setting, but there's so much, or like even I find Rokugan for Legend of the Five Rings, like there's so much history there that it's like hard to come in and just be like, I know what I'm doing. But it's closer that it is to like something that we understand and know, like European medieval history, which like if you play fantasy, you know a little bit about, you know.
Yes.
Then it's easier for people to like get a foot in and like start, you know, and then like the specific stuff can come later. But like as long as you have like enough of a grounding to be like, I can play a crusading knight, I know what that is, I know what that looks like, I know that, well, you know. I think that's really useful.
I think and it comes back to the simplicity of deciding, back to the last topic actually, this is what we want from this game, we're now going to build the world and do it. I think equally it's really important to have something like, this is like if you were in medieval Christendom and there was a conflict. Imagine that. Now take away Christianity. Christianity has been destroyed. What happens in this situation then? Does the crusade go a different way? Does this empire rise? Does this empire fall? You know? So it's always good to have the one thing that you've got to think about that then applies to everything.
Like, it's interesting to think, like, if all those dudes went to Jerusalem to conquer it, but they're being, like, polite because God says they have to be, and so you shouldn't kill civilians or whatever, you know, the case may be, or you shouldn't, like, plunder temples and stuff like that. And you get there, and then God dies. You're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just a big warrior, and I want to get rich, so I'm just going to kill people. And because I think, like, for, like, it's always kind of been my assumption that a lot of like knights were really just like very good at killing, and then
Yes.
but then also were like religious because they had to be because society said so. And then if like there's no God anymore, and that factually, you're like, well, now I'm just good at killing, like that's like
yeah. And weirdly, it's very cool to think about medieval society, but from a humanist perspective, because they are now technically the people that were religious were right because the gods did exist, but now the people that are humanists are also right because now the gods definitely don't exist. It's two instances of people being right, but at different time periods.
Yeah,
and now it's there are knights that are now out for humanity, and that's it. They don't need anything else. There are knightly orders, and there are houses that have stood still because they have the wealth and they have the land and they still have all of that, but the societal structure is crumbling. So it's basically power grabs and people trying to solidify their position in whatever way they can.
Because if you think about like the power of like a bishop in the Middle Ages or like an abbot or something, overnight that person is no longer powerful. All of their like implied power is gone when there's no God anymore, and that there's no God anymore. And so like when you get home from the crusade and he's like, well, I expect 1/10 of what you made, you're like, fuck off, buddy. No.
Yeah, exactly. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And he's like, well, you have to. And you're like, no, I could just kill you. Like, I have all the soldiers. Like, I don't have to do anything. So I think I think lots of people would also have a sense of innate good and like would have been, religious and like that aligned with their sort of mentality anyway. And there's lots of people who would just be like, this is how we've always done things, and therefore I give 1/10 to the church and they look after poor people or whatever else. There's plenty of people who would get home and be like, fuck no, like now I can just do what I want, I think that's very interesting.
And it's and again, like I said before, it's really nice because I know I can just run this game, and any NPC, any situation that we come across in this game, I just have to go back to that one question, like how have they reacted to this shift?
Yeah,
and then the work kind of just writes itself, really. Well, the players will hopefully then obviously do the rest. That's what they should do, right? But yeah, so anyway, this is kind of spiraled into talking about that particular setting, and really, I don't know. I think there is a lot to be said of taking like a big long break from playing games, but this is, I don't know. Like, I think this has been, like, I'm talking like a month or so, maybe, or like a couple of months. Like, this has been a long time. It's been like half a year, which I had to do because it's just stuff in real life, and real life comes first. That's the old saying. But I don't really. I think it's just about having somewhere to put your creativity. And like, I was thankful that I was able to sort of have these thoughts in my brain, have a Google Doc, and I was okay. Like I was able to like get some good ideas, reflect on some of the games that I run. Like, also this gave me time to think about Vampire quite a lot, because that's obviously been on hiatus, as has Lawkeepers. Vampire, I'm really excited to get back to. For those of you that have watched any of those sessions, it's going to be back on the 28th, which is super exciting. But yeah, it's just giving me time. What do you think, Lloyd? Like, what have you experienced if you've ever taken long breaks? If you have you ever stopped?
No, not like fully. There's a few times I've had to like work, and my gaming cut down dramatically, but I've never like entirely stopped playing games since I started. I wonder, like, I think I'd have to do something, because like currently, like a lot of my creative output goes into writing games and playing games and stuff like that. And so I think like I'd have to be doing something with that, which is what you did with Godgrave. I think you have to be. It's like a very fun hobby, and I think I'd be making stuff anyway. I wonder, like, did you get rusty?
Well, I'm actually wondering about that myself, because I'm going to have to run a game in a couple of weeks and see what happens. I think probably. I think so. I think it might be. Who knows? The thing is, the thing that I like that the first one that I'm going back to is Vampire, which is a highly improvisational game
Yeah,
anyway. Like
yeah.
it's as long as I've got like the basics, I'm good. But what I've done with Vampire, because as I've mentioned before, excuse me, the way that I prepped Vampire was just at the very beginning of the campaign. I just did all the work at the front, so that's a game where, because you're using an actual inbuilt setting and you're using inbuilt lore, so you've got to ascertain who is the Primogen of the Malkavians. You know, you've got to do that if you want to run the setting as it is from the books and stuff. You've got to make sure you know where everything is. But once you've done that, you can just run the game, and you can as long as you know where everyone is, you just do what you want. I've done that again, actually, because now that there's been a jump in time, and there will be a jump in time, 6 months in fact, and there's going to be new elements at play within the city. That now involves me having to go back to that original document and sort of see how things have ticked over from that point, which has been really hard to do. It's almost like I'm prepping for a campaign with one session at the beginning and then seeing how it goes. This is, to me, it's almost like a new second campaign, like a season 2 almost.
But because that guy came back, the big boy, the prince, I guess that would change everything, because like suddenly how loyal you are to the Camarilla is way scarier, because there's like this ancient dude around, right? There's differences there, I guess. Interesting.
And the fact that he isn't there.
Yes. Yep. But is awake is like, because there's like this constant threat that he might be there at any moment. You know, it could be anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
Like if I'm like vocally sort of like Donnic is like vocally anti-Camarilla, I'm suddenly probably a lot quieter about it, because this guy could be anywhere. You know,
I'll believe when I see it, Lloyd. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I won't be quieter about it, but Donnica might be.
Oh man. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's people have to take breaks because of real life, and that just happens. It did really suck. There were times where I was like, oh my god, like I saw you guys like planning games and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good, and I'm really it's made me really value what we do, if anything. Really value it, because it's something that's really special, and it cannot be emulated by anything else.
No,
that's the other thing.
That's a big thing. I've been trying to or I sometimes try and play computer role-playing games, and they just like don't grab me anymore. I just can't do it. Like,
sucks. Yep,
they're good, like really good games. I know that they're good, and like I start, and I'm just like, yeah, but I kind of want to do this thing. You know, you can't do it. The freedom of like playing a role-playing game, and the kind of games that we play in as well, particularly, means that like I've just been spoiled, I think, you know.
Yes.
Like other kinds of role-playing media just like don't do it for me in the same way.
Dude, I'm with you, man. I'm 100% with you. Did we get any questions?
Yeah, I think so.
This is a good question. This is a question in itself.
We got some questions from Jeff in Caius's Corner.
Hey, okay, let's hear him.
How do you approach returning to a character as a player after a break? This is Jeff. Does you try? Come on, Jeff, you can do better than that. Do you try and be as consistent as possible to the old portrayal, even though a lot of time has passed for you to reflect on them and their changes, or do you allow them to be more in line with your current mindset and understanding, even if it breaks from the character, how they had been acting before? It's a good question.
Well, again, going to find out, because there's a few NPCs that I'm likely going to have to betray, depending on where you go in Vampire, that are established and are particular characters with particular ways that they operate and the ways that they speak and stuff. I don't know.
I think it's tricky because play styles change a lot, I find. You know, my play style changes massively, and I know that it shifts like frequently. And so I mean, not so hugely that it won't be recognizable, but like, you know, the kind of games that you play change the way that you play. So that's interesting. Like, I wonder, I think like, I mean, I'm still Gordian not cutting focused, as in like, I want to do the thing as quick as possible with as few mistakes as possible, with as few like steps as possible. That's like my usual sort of go-to. I want to do this thing, I want to succeed at the thing, and I want to avoid any sort of trouble while I do the thing. So that's kind of been my MO for like a long time, and I really enjoy playing that way because it feels very satisfying when you get it to work. So I think like that's fun, but yeah, I guess like maybe your mannerisms change over time. If you're taking a long break, certainly like you could really come back different. And I wonder then like picking up from a campaign where it's like one session ends and the next one starts, like Lore Keepers, for example, it's been like a long time since we've played that game.
Yeah, man, that's gonna be crazy.
Yep. It's going to be tricky, you know.
Yeah, that will be. It genuinely will be really tricky. It will happen. I swear to God, that campaign is going to be finished at some point. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. I tell you what. Actually, I think it would be definitely more difficult for Lore Keepers than say something like if jumping back to be Faroth in Against the Shadow.
Yeah. Which
I still think should happen. No, but I think it'll be easier because like Faroth was basically just myself, sort of like envisioning what a character from Middle-earth is and knowing how they sort of speak, and then it just sort of happens. Like it isn't like I'm gonna get into character now. It's more like, okay, what's happening? Okay, I guess I need to say this. Blah. I don't say it. You know.
Yeah. I think it depends on the character, right? Because Marius too has a very specific thought process, and he's like,
yeah, he does. Yeah.
I definitely get how Marius is, and his motivations are clear to me anyway, and like, so I think that's probably fine. But I think it's different if you like Vampire is a good example because it's more modern, and I feel like modern characters are more normal, more like normal people, you know?
Yep.
Like Donika's like just a dude. He's like quite good at computers, and now he's a vampire, and so he's a bit more focused. But like, it's trickier, I think, with like modern characters, or I would say it's really tricky with like Call of Cthulhu characters who are just normal people, you know, than it is with like, because fantasy characters tend to be kind of archetypal anyway, you know, to be like, I am a paladin, therefore I am orderly or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's any others. To be honest, I think it's a lot like when you're GMing, like a lot of the time, at least I like to hope, when you go back to GMing, you know, you eventually get back to the groove again, and then you're away. I think it might be the same as a player. Once you fall into that familiar dynamic, I think you're okay. It's like when we do the Dice Cast, for instance, Lloyd. Like I'm thinking about like, how the hell do we do the Dice Cast? And then all of a sudden, here we are. We can do it. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it depends on the character. Yeah, like you're right. It does depend. It depends. There we go.
That's the classic.
It took a while to. I think we said depends quite a lot before we actually got to that. But there we are. Yeah.
Got a question in the chat from Cobra J. What type of preparations do you do to help you try and get into character? I don't have any. I have a smoke and a cup of coffee before I start my game. And that's like, ritualistically, I am now in the game. Like, separates whatever I was doing before from the game. But I don't do voices for my characters ever. Well, I do, but it's just basically less as an ums and more like maybe a lower voice. But I don't tend to do like character voices, you know. So I don't do a lot of prep for getting into character.
Controversial, but I think player characters in particular. No, I'm going to be careful here. If you're happy to do a voice that you have in your head as that voice for that character, then you should totally do it. If it's a voice that you're going to struggle with whilst also trying to make decisions in the game and play the game as is, then you probably shouldn't do it. Like, there's some very talented people that we play with that are able to like hold accents and things. And it sounds great. And I love it. Like, I'm just trying to think if I ever do. I don't really do it, to be honest, which is, I put on lots of voices for Vampire. I guess you could argue that when I was Vagnar, that was definitely like a different kind of he put on. He was just like but it wasn't an accent. He just was a bit more snarly and swore quite a lot.
Yep, sort of Batman-esque.
Yeah, and like a little bit of Game of Thrones, basically calling someone like a twat
Bitch.
every other line or something, or a dumb bitch. That was it. You dumb bitch. Yeah, that's what he'd always say. Oh,
Lots of people name their swords. Lots of cuts.
Lots of cunts. It's the best line of the whole show. 8 seasons, best line.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that actually, because I won't talk about it here because just in case other people haven't seen it, but I've seen it. I have weird thoughts about.
Me too. Yeah, Nico was unhappy.
No, I bet he wouldn't, and I think I know why. I think there's a. It's the finish line. Push. Like that's what I get from that first episode. Anyway, like everything was happening a bit quickly. Do you know what I love? The one thing that I've stolen from Game of Thrones to go in my games, and I do it for all my games, and I think it's a really, really good bit of something to take to keep in mind if you're writing for scripts, or if you're writing for novels, or if you want to like deliver cool dialogue in like role-playing games and stuff. Always have a story. There's a convention that Game of Thrones, or at least it used to use, where I'm just trying to think of an example.
Like where a character makes a point telling a story, is that what you mean? Yeah,
they make a point by telling a story. So Tywin Lannister says, I remember the night you were born. I remember the night when, you came out of your mother, and like when he's talking to Tyrion, and then you died, and I held you in my arms, and I considered throwing you into the waves, but I didn't, because you're my son and you're a Lannister. Like that is something that anyone and everyone should steal, because it is a really rad way of world building, character building, and dropping a rad scene.
Varys does a lot of that as well. The Spider does a lot of that.
Yeah.
When I was a boy in the streets of blah blah blah, like
before I was cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. There's tons of that. But that's actually a really good point. I never really thought about that, but there is a lot of that in Game of Thrones where people make their point by telling a story first.
That's the start, particularly of the books. Is like I've only read the first 3 before I got bored, because I was like, I know what's happening. I'll wait till the show's over and then I'll read the books. But I've read the first 3, and that's essentially like half of the story of Game of Thrones is hearing about the other story that happened before, which is like Robert's Rebellion and stuff like that. Like half of Game of Thrones is learning about a different story that isn't happening at the moment.
Yeah.
But it sets people's motivations for the story that's currently happening, which is why I love George R.R. Martin. It's very deep and well considered, and just cool. But
we were looking at it yesterday because I'm going to be running this Westeros game soon. We were looking at like who the Lord Stark is at the time of this, and it's Cregan Stark, and like it's like the setting is so rich that you can like Google like House Stark, and you go to the family tree, and then you can like click on Cregan Stark, and there's fucking pages on him, and you're like, who knows this? Why is it like there's so much information on this dude, and it's like everyone that you click on, every house, there's so much information, which is great as a GM. It's really, really good. But
I think that is the case towards heavy prep is that if you can do it and you can lay it out like George R.R. Martin and have really handy tools on the internet like Wikipedia to use, then you should totally do it, because it's a pre-made setting. Like all that information is at your disposal. You can just do it. Whereas, running games like that when you're flying by the seat of your pants and you don't know what's around the next corner, you don't know what's 20 leagues west from you, then it's a little harder. I suppose that's kind of obvious, though, isn't it? Very obvious point to make.
Well, it's tricky because it's a life's work to make something as detailed as Westeros or Middle Earth. But it's getting there with. I mean, Isklot feels that way to me, but it's just because I know it and I can make the rest of the stuff up. But the more that we play games in it, the more it becomes canon. The more like places get names, and the more that people get names and stuff. And it's I guess that's what you have to do, is just run hundreds of games in it until it feels complete.
Well, this is the weird thing, and this is what I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I forgot to actually message you about it. But the tradition of storytelling back in when there were Vikings was it was an oral tradition. People would sit around and they would talk to each other, and that's how the stories were created. And in a way, I find it really, really intriguing that Isklot history is basically based off all the games that you've played up until this point.
Yeah.
Like everything that's happened has happened in a game. So really, it's like an extension of that, and I think that's really cool.
I never thought about that. Yeah, it is. It's like all oral storytelling.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe we should make a thing of that.
I should. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have other questions? Because I know I had the chat working, the YouTube chat itself, but I don't know if we had any questions or not.
We do. We have another question from Jeff.
Okay.
When playing as or with a wizard in a world where magic is scary, how do you balance the total knowledge of mechanics you as a player have with the mystery, exploration, and wonder the character might have?
Oh God.
It's tricky. I guess it depends. Of course, it depends. But so I would say that if I was playing like a human wizard who was like young and learning, like starting at level 1, I would play a very, very curious, like trying to figure it all out. Like nothing is mastered; it's always an experiment, sort of character. But the difference when I play Amon in Embers is that Amon is like over 1,000 years old and has mastered it already, and so it seems effortless to him. He's still interested in all of like understanding more of magic and like learning more, but it seems effortless to him because he's been doing it for so long. So I guess it depends on what kind of character you're playing. Because if you're playing, I think, particularly like a human or like a curious race, it makes a lot of sense to have them come across as curious and interested, and like it's a constant learning experience.
I guess you kind of tap into it. We can go back to that example with Game of Thrones about that sort of storytelling to explain things. I suppose you could go back to kind of like there's a wonder that comes from someone explaining the knowledge that they know. So say one of these elven wizards is explaining to another character, things that character understand, but not necessarily what the other character could understand. That could, I suppose, instill a feeling of wonder as well. Oh my God, like this, there's all this magic. There's ways to speak to people through dreams. There's ways to summon lightning from the sky. Like, I don't know. It's pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to watching that game now.
It's good.
That's going to be on the old list.
Yeah, it's very, very satisfying so far.
I literally don't know where the questions are, mate.
It's only one more from Caius.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Well, to end with, then, let's go with Caius Corner. Caius Corner.
By their very nature, spells defy our instinctive knowledge of the laws of physics. Spellcasters must therefore rely on the descriptions in the rulebooks to define how they work. Do you have a guiding philosophy to help you resolve those questions in grey areas that are not obvious from a reading? Can you define a philosophy for adjudicating spells? Caius.
Do we have another show in this?
there's more to this question, of course. I'm a member of a RAW, as in Rules as Written, site for D&D, which doesn't seek to discuss personal interpretations, but only the most literal, legalistic interpretation of what is written. Does your magic bow, or at least consider the pronouncements of such a court? Oh, bow, sorry. Does your magic bow, or at least consider the pronouncements of such a court? How important is language in magic? Some spells, like wish or command, are often taking literal words that a spellcaster uses as the base of effect of what they have. But languages have different qualities. The command spell in English can compel a target to give, but in Spanish to Darcelo, give it to him. Is this fair?
Oh my God.
It's quite a question.
I mean, this is why we have Caius Corner, because he can ask us questions that are smarter than any answer we can give. I love it. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Lois has whacked it into the chat so I can read it again. So, okay. First of all, I think that's a really good point, because there have been famous misinterpretations. I say that because I won't be able to think of an example now, but there are many occasions that you've seen Mike Mills go onto Twitter and say, no, this means this in the spell section of the player's handbook, and have had to make corrections. And I think, I don't know, I think it must be very. Well, Lloyd, you can attest to this. You've been writing how many spells for how many months? Like how do you find terming those spells when you're writing Isglath?
It's real tricky because I don't have a legalese mind at all. I don't think that way. And lots of the spells in Isglath are pretty open to interpretation, kind of by design. Certainly, like a lot of the rituals that the Seith Kona can use, like they take so one of them takes a month to cast. and like you have to do all these really specific things, and then like at the end you can curse a village. And like some of the suggestions of how you can curse a village is like all of the fish that are caught in the village like are rotten on the inside, or all of the animals in the village are stillborn, or things like that. But it's vague as fuck, and it's vague as fuck on purpose so that you can come up with your own stuff. But I guess it's important that people who play Yscloft understand the purpose of that, and they don't try to game that spell. You know, because it's very possible with Magic to game the fuck out of it and turn it into like very sort of like you can maximize a lot of stuff with Magic pretty quickly and like turn it into not fun sort of.
If you're a cleric as well, even the fact that you can just summon like fresh water to me is enough. Like, oh look, I can feed you now. Like you come across a starving village, don't worry about it. I've got a cleric here.
Yep,
sort it out.
We were talking about we played it in Tyler's second world game, and I was playing a druid, and I had Goodberry, and it's like you summon these 10 berries, and they feed you for a day. Okay, so you summon 10 of them, and then you can feed 10 people for a day, and that's one spell slot. So let's say you have 3 second level spell slots. You summon 30 of these berries, and you feed your entire tribe for the day. No one has to hunt. Great, wonderful. You know, like everyone can focus on crafting for a day or whatever, and then you do that every day, and you don't have to hunt anymore. And like no one has to grow food because you can just have one guy whose job it is to cast Goodberry 3 times a day. Like, okay, it just destroys the world. Like it's just
It does, and it's. Do you know what? Actually, weirdly, I don't really listen. No, that's a lie. I listen. The start again. Take 2. I listened to an interview with Chris Perkins, right? Who I really like. I really like Chris Perkins. I think he is like the perfect balance of like a good storyteller, but with like hard rules in place. Do you know what I mean? When he describes something, he only delivers what is necessary. He's not. He doesn't go on a big ass speech like something I do, basically. But he was talking about spells and the fact that there isn't really like there's not so much a magic system in D&D as there are just a number of spells that you can pick and use to your own ends and devices. There isn't sort of like an inbuilt magic system. Like, say you take Dragon Prince from Netflix, which I think is very good, and I recommend if people haven't seen it. The system in that is that you either get magic from nature or you get dark magic, which is what you get when you kill nature. Okay, there is a very, very simple rule, but like that's all there is. There isn't anything like that in D&D. And I like that he dealt with it because he was like, it's simple enough, whereas it can be used, and if you want to make up your own magic system like that, it can work. But it's also definitive enough where you can just say that's all it is. So I think with that mindset, if you're happy just to keep it loosey-goosey like that, then you'll be fine. And I've run many games and I've never had an issue with like spells being too much of a problem because I've agreed that spells are going to be in this game. Like I'm not going to complain that someone's just like maged hand a knife if I knew that they were using magic in this game.
I think like one of the issues is that you can run into is like people can really game. I think it's less common in 5th edition, but I know in previous editions there was things you could do with like, I know you can do it. People are always talking about like taking the bag of holding and a portable hole and making it, and like things, and I just find that so fucking tedious and boring. Like it's just like I find it very like, oh, I broke the game. It's like, okay,
yes, I know what you mean.
Good. It's like baby's first D&D, it's like I get it, but like
yeah. Well, it's not like anything like that would happen. Like the reason we do this is to sort of like tell rich stories and have like really cool interactions and things like that. I've never had like a cool interaction or a really rich story be based around someone who like has gone through the finer details of a particular magical item to ensure that, they get an infinite place to put all their loot in or whatever. I don't know. Like I used to play in games like that and I enjoyed them, but that was knowing that was in place. Like I knew, I could go to a marketplace and buy a +5 long sword and have an enchantment put on it and stuff like,
I think like with Raw, like, I think I'm very open to people using spells in ways that are interesting that they're designed for that.
100%.
And I think that's kind of what Caius means with like, so you might allow someone to use, I don't know, fucking fog cloud or gust or something to get their ship to go quicker, or like things like that. And like that stuff I can really get behind, or like clever uses of spells that it's not designed for this thing, but it does it anyway. Like I like that sort of stuff. But I think that like rules is written, and like if you're playing Adventurers League or something, like you can't do that. Like the spell is for this thing and it's really specific. And but yeah, I think it's tricky because like a lot of spells are very open to interpretation, or like they can be if you stretch your mind even a tiny bit, you know. Be very open to like, well, you could do this with it, or you could do this with it, or yeah, it's tricky. I guess my answer is it depends.
It depends, and that is the dice cast. I'm just gonna ask one last thing, Lloyd, before we wrap up, because my voice is so sore, my throat's so sore. What would your ruling be as a GM then, if you have a Spanish is their first language, and the spell says give it to him rather than give? Which way do you rule?
I don't know. I guess it's written in English. Like it's intended to be English.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would just be like, what's the spell supposed to do? What are you trying to do? Like give, I guess like maybe Spanish has like a case thing where like it has to have a gender to the verb, maybe. That's why it's like that.
Yeah.
It feels like kind of petty, or like kind of like uninteresting to be like, well, you have to give it to a male character now.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess.
Or just like, or just this happening in the first place. I'd just be like, what is it you're doing? Sorry. And then I'd be like, well, this is how I thought the spell worked, and I'm running the game, so
yeah.
You can run it like this, or if you come up with a really creative reason, I'll totally let you do it, because that's much more fun than us wasting time talking about it.
Yeah.
Like we are now. This is the dice cast. And that's it. Shall we call it there, man?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect. Well, if you liked this video, give it a like. If you would like to see more like it, then give me a subscribe. Or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Wow, I remembered it.
Very good.
Take it easy. And how do we end the dice cast?
I think we just say bye until.
Oh, yeah, we just say, hang on. Wait. Ready?
Yeah.
Bye.